Okay. Just check. Okay, perfect. Okay, so welcome everyone. Welcome at the workshop with Danielle Wilde, Honing Shit, Soil, Dirt, Eating Our Way to Better Futures. It's a workshop where we are going to feel, taste, smell, and imagine our ways towards new relationships with the food we eat, the creatures that shape our tastes, and the soil that we all rely on as humans. Uh, Before we start with the actual workshop, I just have to share some practical information that is important, especially for all of you in the Zoom room. First thing is, please feel free to use the chat if you have any technical or other practical issues during the whole workshop. I'm here as a moderator. My name is Markéta. And we also have a technician here, Lukáš Cetera, who is logged here as the Uroboros Festival, who can help you to resolve, issues with audio or video or whatever other unexpected problems you might have during the session. And of course, feel free to use the chat as well to share your comments and notes and ideas during the whole workshop, or links if you have some nice associations with what Danielle is saying. Like, please feel free to share it. And for the first part, Danielle will introduce the workshop and present some background of her work. So for that first period, I would suggest to mute ourselves, mute our microphones so we don't have any unnecessary noises and disturbance. And also please feel free to take pictures, especially for these workshops, which is very hands-on and crafty. So take pictures if you like, not just like screenshots, but also of your work desk and your food prototyping activities. And you can, of course, share them either here or upload them in a Google folder that I will share with you, like a link to the folder. This is for Danielle and for the festival to have material for the archive. So again, just if you feel okay with it and if you like. Also feel free to share it on social media, of course. We have a bunch of fancy hashtags that we are using, so I'm going to paste those in the chat as well for you. Again, use them just if you like, of course. And last but not least, this is the third day of this festival. And you might have noticed that most of or actually all of the events now are fully booked. So if you would like to attend some more events today, later, or tomorrow, you can also watch them on stream on YouTube. It seems to be working pretty fine. So I will also share the festival YouTube stream link in the chat for you. And now I'll stop with this boring practical introduction and I will very quickly introduce Danielle, our guest today and the host of this workshop. So Danielle is Associate Professor of Embodied Design at the University of Southern Denmark in Kolding, where she leads the Body Biosoft Lab. She specializes in participatory, speculative, and critical research through design methods, bringing focus to the social and ecological impact of body technology pairings and human food interactions. She has organized numerous workshops, critical salons, and other experimental gatherings. I have been attending some of those and I was very happy attendant, where she engages stakeholders in various co-creation activities and critical discussions about the body bio food tech teams. And I personally really like Danielle's concept of compostables, with which he refers to using food as a permanently sustainable design material that can sort of be used in design experiments and prototyping sessions without leaving much mess behind. So I really like this idea of like eating your prototyping material or letting it decompose after your creative session is over. And you can find more about Danielle on her website, of course. I will share the link as well into the chat. And that's all from me now. So again, welcome everyone at the workshop, and I will pass the stage to Danielle.
Thank you. So, hi everybody. First of all, fantastic. Thank you for coming. And Makeda, thank you for inviting me to be part of Uroboros. It's so exciting to do this. It's also really exciting because, you know, most of us don't have a long history of doing everything that we do mediated by video chat. And as Makeda said, my work is very hands-on. It's body on, you smell it, you taste it, you shape it, you touch it, you think through moving, through making, and through doing. And you know, there are some really big questions around how do we do this kind of work when it's mediated through video chat? How do we do this kind of work at a distance? Because, you know, we're going to be working like this for quite some time in some way or another. So how do we turn it into an opportunity rather than a massive compromise? So today is one of my experiments with that. So how it will work is I'm going to introduce you to honey, shit, and then DÄRT. First of all, I'll give a small presentation about honey. Then I will show some experiments with honey, and then you'll be sent out into breakout rooms where together in small groups, you'll work together with honey. I'll give you some provocations and some ways to think about it. And then you'll come back and we'll have a little chat about what happened. Then from honey, I'll go on to shit and do the same thing. And then I'll go on to DÄRT and do the same thing. And then we'll all come back and talk about how we can think about how these can bring us through to better futures. So I'm going to share my screen for a little bit. And there we are there. And hopefully I can manage all of the technology things. So the conversation at the end is about eating our ways to better futures. So let's start. Let's see, I have to start it. And let's start with honey. And honey, I really need to thank I work with research apprentices at the University of Southern Denmark, and some of my research apprentices are here with me, and some of them are not, but they've all helped me put together the work with honey because they've been doing a lot of research with honey lately, and I'll talk about why that is in a moment. But let's look at honey. So honey is mainly stored by bees to provide nutrition throughout the winter. Now, what's important is if it's taken away, they produce more so that they have enough resources for the winter. So beekeepers work with bees in a way. They collaborate with these processes of bees, and they collect honey, and the bees generate more, and they make sure that they leave enough that's there for the winter. But they also do a couple of other things. If bees go to a monoculture field, for example, if they go to a canola field, canola is rapeseed, if they go to one of these monoculture fields and they come back, then the beekeeper has to drain off that honey before the winter, because if they don't, the crystals that form are too large for the bees to be able to do what they need to do with the honey. To do what they need to do with it. As it freezes, it becomes unusable for them and the whole entire hive can die. So there is a two-way, a shared exchange that goes on here. Depending on the nectar and the pollen that the bees collect, honey will have a different color and or a different texture, and we're going to play with that in a moment. Oops, I can't seem to go on to the next slide. So there are two methods for removing honey from the beehive. You can sling honey and you can press honey. And I don't really know what the difference is yet because I've only just started working with honey, but I have some examples of both of them. Honey's not the only product that bees produce. They produce also propolis and wax and pollen and royal jelly. But there are some interesting things that happen. Only female bees work, for example. The male bees, their only purpose in the hive is to fertilize the queen bee. So here you can see this is honey, and it's in the honeycomb. And if pollen-rich honey is eaten daily, it can decrease the effect of hay fever. It Honey can be used to care for wounds, and you can get similar or better results than modern wound care dressing. So there are a lot of health benefits from honey. It's a low cost and effective therapy for the treatment of diabetic foot ulcer. And natural honey contains high amounts of prebiotics, which can be beneficial for the intestinal microbiota. And that's very, very interesting for the research that I'm doing. And the work I'm doing with the research apprentices is we're trying to work out what can we learn from the stewardship act of beekeeping about how to become better stewards for our gut microbiome. So I'll talk about that in a moment. Honey is also good against sore throats and coughs. It coats the inner lining of the throat and destroys harmful microbes. And people diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome who experience severe diarrhea or constipation, bloating or stomach discomfort have been successfully treated with raw manuka honey on an empty stomach. And raw manuka honey comes from New Zealand and Australia. I'm not sure if you can get it. Well, you can get it in other places. I'm not sure if it's produced in other places though. So propolis is another thing that bees produce, and it's a resinous-like substance which is made by the worker bees who collect sap and gum of tree bark and buds of various poplar and cone-bearing trees. It has a long history of medicinal use as well. So propolis, pro means before and polis means city. What that means when it's put together, propolis, is defense of the city. And if we think about the city being the hive, the worker bees carry the sap and gum back to the hive using their pollen baskets, which we'll see in a minute. Then they synthesize wax by secreting it from special glands on their abdomen. And then the wax is blended together with some pollen and with an enzyme that's contained in their saliva. So basically they use their spit. And the modified propolis is then passed on to other bees, and they use it to stick panels on the hive and to seal cracks. They use it for architectural purposes. But when we want to use it, it's widely used in skincare products. There is some evidence that it can restrict bacterial plague development. Mouthwash containing propolis has been shown to be effective in healing surgical wounds. There's a lot of potential shown in treating human breast cancer because propolis has an anti-tumor activity. And propolis is also useful for gynecological infections. So if you have a combination of 5% propolis with water, you can have an improvement in your vaginal well-being. Wax can be used to do a whole lot of things. And I'm just going to list a whole lot of them here. You can make candles, lubricate wood, make beeswax wrap, you can make French pastries, you can polish furniture, you can make edible crayons, make lip balm or body butter, you can waterproof your shoes. You can polish bronze, you can condition a wooden chopping board and spatulas and spoons and salad bowls that you'll use in the kitchen. You can prevent tools from rusting. So your garden tools, you can cover them in wax that comes from a beehive, and that will protect them from the elements and from rusting. You can rub it on baking pans, you can buff the beeswax onto them and then cook with the pans just like normal, and over time they'll develop a permanent layer of wax so you don't have to oil or grease them every time. You can unstick zippers when they get stuck in cold weather, and you can tame flyaway hair. So wax is amazing. You can do anything with it. So here are the little, they're called pollen pants that I was talking about, or pollen trousers. They have another name in English. The Danish name is pollen pants, or I think it might be the German name as well. So the pollen is collected on their legs in these sacks that become like little trousers, and they take it between plants, and that's where the pollination happens. But they also bring balls of it back to the hive for food. And so these pollen pellets, which have pollen and nectar, they account for 30% of a bee's weight, and they hang off the hind legs like overstuffed saddlebags. And researchers have investigated just how securely bees carry this precious cargo. And what they've worked out is the long hairs on their legs help hold the pollen pellets in place as the animals fly. And so they have some pretty amazing ways of working. And the pellets, even though they seem precarious, they just held on with the hair on the legs. They're really firmly attached. So an extraordinary amount of force is needed to dislodge the pellet. It's about 20 times more force than a what bees do and how they do it can help us certainly not replace bees, because we don't want to be in a position to replace bees, but they can help us mitigate some of the impacts of some of human activities. Have a lot of impact, as we all know. This is royal jelly. Royal jelly does a whole lot of wonderful things as well. They say that royal jelly is the secret of eternal youth, that it improves blood pressure, that it's high in antioxidants, that it's great for blood sugar control, that it has beneficial effects on osteoporosis and bone loss, that it's anti-inflammatory, that it's an immune modulator, that it improves the appearance of skin, that it decreases bad cholesterol, that it increases fertility, that it keeps your metabolism running smoothly, and it aids weight loss. In the hive, it's used for slightly different purposes. So all of the really young larvae are given royal jelly, but only some of them continue to receive it. What happens is, and if you've heard of epigenetics, epigenetics is where your DNA can change based on environmental factors, environmental influences, and that's called epigenetic change. And royal jelly is used within the hive depending on how much of the royal jelly the larvae is given and how long it's fed for will determine if it becomes a female worker bee, if it becomes a male who's destined to fertilize the queen, or if it actually becomes a queen bee. So it's pretty amazing. So that's an overview of honey. One of the things I said at the beginning was, depending on the nectar and pollen that bees collect, the honey will have a different color and texture. So that's what I want to look at now, and that's what I want all of us to look at with our honey. Honey has what's called organoleptic qualities. So you can see the definition on the screen there. And I'm going to step out of the slideshow and come back here, and I'm going to change to another screen, and I'm going to show you some experiments that I'd like you to do with your honey, that I'd like you to do together when you go out into the breakout room. In the meantime, Marketa, while I'm doing that, Marketa is going to share a file into the chat window. And if you can download that, it has some hints for how you might be able to talk about your honey. So let me just move to the other camera. And there you go. You can see my lovely setup. And I have a whole lot of honeys here. So this one is from Australia. It's a leatherwood honey, and it's a really runny honey. So I don't know if you can see that running out, but we can see it start to fall. This one is from Denmark, from an island not too far from where I live, an island called Barsø. And I don't have much of it left because it's delicious. I'm going to sit that there. And this is runny, but not quite as runny as the other one. So we can see that there. And here I have honey that comes from the same hives, but one is slung and one is pressed. And I can't remember which one is which, to be truthful, but you can see they have different properties. So this one is more creamy. I'll just put that there. And this one, it's also creamy, but I don't know if you can see that, it's darker in color when you look at them next to each other. Hang on, I've lost my paper towel. Give me a second. I have a honey that has hazelnuts in it, and I'm not sure what kind of honey this is, but this is a runny honey. I have a honey from Tasmania. As an Australian, I get to go to Australia sometimes, though it may be a while before I get back there again. And what's important about these, and what we can't see on the video, is that the smell of these is all completely different. And the texture is different, and the way it behaves is different. And this honey is really particular. This honey I purchased at the airport in Stavanger in Norway. And if you look at it, it's a creamy honey. And, you know, it doesn't behave very differently from the other creamy honeys. But what distinguishes it is that the beehives live on the airport runway. And the airport sees the honey as a way to track the health of, let's see, they have a whole kind of thing about it. Oh, I can't remember where it's gone, but here it is. So this honey is the result of 5,499 flights. So Avinor Stavanger, the airport in Stavanger, was the first airport in Scandinavia to launch its own brand of honey in 2014. And the honey produced between the runways provides us with the opportunity to monitor pollution levels in the air, rainwater, flowers and pollen around the airport. Now they sell it, I imagine, for people to eat, but I don't know about you, but I haven't eaten it, and I don't think I will ever eat it. I would need to get into a position of extreme food insecurity to willingly put that in my body. Okay. So we're going to go into the breakout rooms, and what I would like you to do is share your honeys with each other, but think about how you are talking about it. So the document that Marketa has shared is a document that advises people who own restaurants how to talk about the food on their menu, the different qualities that you might get. Are you talking about textures? Are you talking about smells? Are you talking about preparation methods? I have honeys on my finger at the moment. Do we want to talk about, you know, is it how its consistency? Do we want to talk about, I have another honey here that's, you know, just one of these ones that's meant to be runny, so I can just pour it out like that and we can see it just running. So I invite you to go into the breakout rooms and talk with the people that you find yourself with, share the honey that you have, the origin of the honey that you have, and find ways to speak about the honey. And then when we come back together again in 10 minutes time, then one of the groups will be asked to share what they came up with. How do we think about food? How do we talk about food? Can we find ways, can we find new ways to talk about food or to share food that might help us share the organoleptic qualities, the sensual and sensory qualities of food, even though we're at a distance from each other? Okay, off you go. Lukasz is going to send everyone out.
Yeah, Lukasz, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. So please kick us out of this main room.
And those of you who are co-hosts, please remember to press the record
Keep recording
when you get into
breakout room.
Okay, I will send 3 people to each breakout room now.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, just don't forget to confirm and join the breakout room.
Yeah, you have to confirm. You will see a little pop-up.
And if anyone has any questions, speak up. Okay, I don't know, maybe Marketa, you can keep track of whether everyone's gone, and we should have maybe a couple of people who stay here in the main room.
Yeah, sure. You know, it will take like a few seconds, I guess, because Lukasz needs to manually click on people's names and put them in the breakout room. So it will just take a little bit.
So I'll wash my hands in the meantime.
Andrew is asking, how do we know who is hosting the breakout room? You will be like co-hosting one of the breakout rooms, so you can, you know, record it.
And if there are 2 hosts co-hosts in there, it doesn't matter, just record.
Yeah, just to
It
have
doesn't, it doesn't matter if you
backup.
have 2 recordings, it's better than none.
Yeah, but in the meantime, if someone has any questions for Danielle, I think this awkward moment where we are waiting to be sent out to a waiting room or to a breakout room is a good time.
Yep, I may have a question. Hold on, the video on. Yeah, well, so how come you have so many honeys? Is it like a field of your specialty, like honey in particular, or do you just have a lot of food? Sorry, I've been just wondering about this all the way through. So.
I mentioned that I'm Australian, and the flora and fauna in Australia is radically different from the flora and fauna in Denmark. It's radically different. The smells are different, the flowers are different, everything is different, and the honey is different. So I don't actually eat a lot of honey, but whenever I'm just fascinated with the difference. So the smell is completely different. And I love, 3 of these honeys are from local producers. They're made by friends, these 3 here. And I love supporting them to do this. I love supporting them to have local hives, because that encourages bees to be happy and to be looked after, and to ensure that we have bees in our ecosystems. And I just miss the smell. I can't transmit the smell to you. So one of the tasks with the document that Marketa sent through, one of the more difficult tasks perhaps is, how do we communicate the smell of something to people? How do I communicate the smell of Tasmanian meadow honey?
I'm gonna go to the room now. Thanks, that's really interesting.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we have people slowly leaving to their rooms.
Okay, I'm going to change camera back to
right.
me. Oh.
So much honey.
Yeah, I know.
Brought my own as well, made proudly by my mum beekeeper, who is hopefully watching us now. But okay, so now it seems that it's 5 of us in this room, including Lukáš. Lukáš, am I supposed to stay in this room? I guess. So
I can leave you here, or if you want to join, I can join you.
If every room has a co-host, then I can just stay here.
I will double check and I will let you know, but if I will not appear, it's okay.
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 If we lose you, we lose you. But it should be okay. That each room should have someone recording now.
So I'm not going to participate in this bit. I want to hear all of you talking about your honey. I've spoken about mine, but maybe work together to try to find words for it.
One thing, do you want us to read the document before, or?
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. We don't have to, just so everybody knows,
It's a resource. If it's useful,
yeah. I will just a second. I will go get my honey jars.
Yeah. And everyone else, if you've got your honey, start chatting about it. Start sharing it. It's over to you.
Okay, cool. I might start. I have my honey here with me. So it's one I got from some beekeepers in Gia, I think it's pronounced. It's a small place near Horsens in southern Denmark. So it's a summer honey. It was made during the summer months as opposed to a spring honey. And it's quite a dark color. They make a spring one as well. It's a lot lighter in color. It's quite viscous, if you can see if you put a spoon in it. It's quite thick. It's not that runny. You can hold it upside down, and it takes quite a while to drip. And it's quite a grainy honey in texture. It kind of feels almost as if there's like that it's crystallized, and you can see the pieces of hot pollen in it. And it's also quite tasty. So.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you can.
You can see the hot pollen. What does that look like? Can you show us?
It's kind of like if you've had like a lemon curd, it has a very similar consistency.
Well,
and it's just
need to lift it up a bit higher.
yeah, it's quite grainy. It doesn't really, you can't fully see it but it kind of, I don't know how you describe it. If you had, you know, when you have lilies and you have the small bits of pollen that fall off that, it looks quite a bit like that. But yeah, it's a sort of sandy texture, and you can just see the small lightly colored grains of pollen in it.
What does it taste like?
I haven't eaten this one for a while, so I'm just gonna try it again. I don't know how to describe it much further past it's sweet and it's honey, but the texture, the grainy texture does give it like quite a unique experience to eating it. And it's a little bit tart, and it's just very viscous and dense versus a normal supermarket honey. But it's it's good.
Well, I brought all of my honeys. I don't know if you can see them. I guess you should. So this is a very liquid one. They are all from Czech Republic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm now in Finland, but I was very lucky to have my mom, because she's a beekeeper, to send me like 9 kg of honey via post, you know, because originally I was supposed to be now in Prague and running this festival in Prague, but it didn't happen. So I was supposed to get my honey stash now, but you know, luckily post is still working. So I have this one, which is a very liquid one, and then this one, which is the like pasted honey. Wow. Yeah, so it's very different structure. Yeah. So I like to use this one for like bread, you know, bread and butter and this, because it just tastes better if you bite it. And this one is better for tea, at least for me. The taste is, I find this one much sweeter. I don't know if it has something to do with the texture. I guess yes. That usually, you know, if you have sugary things or like sweet tasting things that are liquid, it somehow tastes like sweeter to me when it's liquid. But maybe it's just me. And then I have this one, which is like almost done. And that's a sort of crossover. So that was actually the very liquid one at the beginning, but over the time it crystallized already, which I was told just...
How much time?
I think it's a few weeks.
It only took you a few weeks to eat all that honey?
I eat a lot of honey. And it's cold in Finland, okay? So like, there's always an excuse to drink tea with honey. No, I know I'm ridiculous. I also have this like ridiculous jar. I don't want to say ridiculous, but this jar that I like had to buy in this little corner store here that was still open even during the lockdown before this package from mom came through. So, and I also ate that, okay, it was a few weeks. But this one is like a pasted one as well. I feel it's not that good, but maybe I'm a little biased, right? Because I just have more emotions towards the one that mom sent me. And I don't know if you can.
So do you know, if it's your mum's honey, do you know the bees?
Well, I even
feel
know
like
them.
You know the bees?
I even know them personally. I have seen them, you know, so. Yeah. No, but I actually can't tell you what like type of bees they are. I know that mom is watching us on stream, but unfortunately she can't say anything. But it's like a part of Czech Republic in the central Bohemia, probably the most foresty part, or one of those like most foresty parts of the Czech Republic. So the bees must be very happy there. But unfortunately, I can't tell you more about it. You can check if she's. Maybe I can ask her on Facebook chat, you know, because I was chatting with her just a few seconds ago, if she's fine on the stream. So if I get the update, I will tell you what type of bees it is. But yeah, so that's all my honeys now. I also have this ridiculous thing that we just have in home, but it's not honey. It's just maple syrup.
Tree honey, eh? Yeah.
Yeah, it's tree honey.
Oh. What about Nadia?
Hi, can you guys hear me? Yep. My connection has been a bit unstable. Sorry, I missed some of the parts. But I feel kind of embarrassed. Everyone has so many beautiful honeys, and I have just a supermarket honey here. I'm in Stockholm, Sweden, and it's similar to the one that Marquetta actually shared. So it's probably, it may be even the same one or the same kind of like producer. But yeah, usually I have like more Swedish honeys that you can find at the supermarket that are like more, they're not in a plastic container, I guess, and they're not, and they're more like ecological. But this one says ecological. And I just use it for putting it in my tea usually and things like that. So I'm not a big honey consumer. But what I've noticed a lot is that here in Sweden, at least, I'm originally half Spanish, half American, and in Spain, the honey is not this color, I think. And I don't know if that has to do with what you were saying, Danielle, about like those two differences, those two different honeys. I can't remember what they were called.
One is spun and one is pressed.
Okay, yeah, exactly. So this one was similar to one of those. But in Spain, they're all like more transparent, more runny. And in Spain, what's interesting, I'm gonna describe a honey that I don't even have. The one in Spain that like my grandma used to buy from the countryside was yeah, it's very runny, and it's just like the local kind of farmer puts them in these, oh no, you bring your own jar. That was what it was. You bring your own jar, and it smelled really strongly of olive tree, or I can't remember what the tree is called in English, but it's like the typical Mediterranean tree, a cork tree. It's a cork tree. Yeah, and it like really actually smells and tastes of that. So yeah, this honey doesn't smell or taste of that, but I think it's, yeah, I don't same as Corey said, I don't really know how else to describe it other than it being sweet and honey right now. Yeah, but the color I think is really interesting.
What's the texture like?
So I think it's thick because it takes a long time to kind of drop. Oh yeah, and I put it in salads a lot. I make salad dressings with honey, and I always have to like stir it a lot to make the dressing kind of liquidy, combining it with oil and stuff. Because I can't like dribble it over something, or else it comes down in like big blobs, I guess. Yeah.
So the document that Marquetta shared has, I don't know if you've been able to open it, but it has a whole lot of, I can maybe open it and share my screen because I have it. Hang on, let me.
Just in the meantime, I managed to figure out the type of the bees, sending it to the chat.
Oh,
it's
great.
Apis mellifera carnica. In Czech, it's včela kraňská, which probably doesn't tell you much, but at least the Latin.
It's not ringing too many bells with myself, I must say.
Yeah, I'm also just copy pasting.
But
she's saying it's from Slovenia.
Like, do you know different types of bees, or could you explain something about the different types, or?
In general, like different types of bees?
Yeah, like what is the differences between them, maybe?
I think that Danielle would probably know that better than me.
No, probably not.
I'm really more on the consumer side, you know.
So if we look at the list that's here, is it acidic? Is it bittersweet? Is it honeyed? You know, is it rich? Is it smoky? Is it spicy? Is it buttery, doughy? You know, how do we find words for these things that can somehow help us to talk about it? So this is the document that you were sent through. Is it velvety? Some of the honeys I had are velvety. So these are to do with preparation method, but you know, like you were just speaking about stirring it. You have to stir it a lot. You know, it's honeyed rather than sugary? Is it velvety, or is it perhaps greasy? Like when it gets on your hands, does it become greasy? You know, how do we think about and find language so that I can imagine what it feels like to taste the honey that Corey has, that has the pollen in it, for example.
I find it interesting that sometimes, or I don't know if you have had it as well, that you are tasting something and you feel the taste, but there is no existing words, no existing word to describe it. But you feel like it's some sound, you know, or a color or something. But you just can't.
Do you have a sound or a color? Make the sound.
I have more more the colors, less than sounds.
So what colors are the honeys that you've got?
This one is a very like a coffee, you know, the milk coffee color, like latte or something like that. Like it tastes like that because, okay, maybe it's velvety, so maybe there is a key to that, right? Because latte is also very velvety, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and this one is like much, I would describe it sharper. It's just sharp in my head. That's the first word I have.
Does it have a color?
Yeah, it is very sunny for some reason.
Sunny.
Maybe because sun, like sharp sun is also sharp.
Yeah.
Something like that. It's a weird mixture of everything. And this, since it has like a lot of crystals,
yeah,
it's like really, it's kind of crumbly, and sometimes you have to like fight a little bit to go through it, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just like, this one is just like tricky. It's like struggle honey, you know, to me. So I'm using this one mostly for the tea because then you don't feel it.
I think mine had this kind of like overwhelmingly sweet taste, you know, when something's like so sweet that it kind of like stays in your mouth for a while. Like I tried it and it's like still there. It's like more than just a piece of candy or something like that. Like lingering, maybe I'd say lingering.
Does it have a color?
No, I don't think so. I can't see beyond the actual color of it, I think.
Yeah. What about yours, Corey? Does yours have color?
Corey, you're muted.
You're muted.
Thanks, Tom. I think I also can't look too much past the actual color on it, but it does have a sort of smoky vibe to it. So maybe like if I was to describe it with a color that it isn't, I would say some sort of murky brown color. I don't think that's too appealing when you think about honey, but that might be what you describe it as.
For those who weren't in our group, Marketa described the color of one of her honey as sharp, like sun.
Oh.
And I can see some people nodding and other people going, what? What about the group? I just randomly choose someone. Kiara. The group of people who were with Kiara, can you tell us what happened?
Hi, my group was Daniela and Andrew.
Yep.
And well, we couldn't have the chance to finish because it took too much time. So yeah, not everyone had the chance to present all their different honey.
Maybe you can though. Maybe you can present your honey now to everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can do this. I don't know.
Did you but what did you discover from the presentation that happened? Were you able to find words? Whoever presented the honey presented it in particular ways, and did the people on the receiving end of that, were you able to understand? Were you able to engage with the language that they used? Did you get a sense of what it might be like?
I think the most part of the impression I got through the camera and not through words, because I could see how the honey is colored and I don't know, the consistency of the honey. but less with the description.
Yeah, go, Andrew.
I can add that the two of us who did manage to present, because we had actually very different types of honey. One was a really homemade, unmarketed, unproduced honey, in the sense that it was very natural, so to speak. In comparison, mine was very commercial. I couldn't even tell you what it was made of. So my description was more the packaging, and the other one, which was unbranded, was very much more about the smells, and there was not much mediating it. So you were directly engaging with the honey, and not, for example, with the label or what's on the label, because actually I can just tell you basic things about mine.
Mm-hmm.
If that helps to make a description.
Okay, I'm going to go. We're going to move on because we're going to build on that. When I share the slides with you, you'll get some references for that. But keep in mind what came up with honey, because now we're going to talk about shit. And shit is a little bit different. Shit can literally mean feces, and we'll speak about that a little bit, but it can also just mean the shit that we have to deal with. But I want to start off with Julia Ennis. She has a wonderful book, and she also has a TED talk. And so I'm just going to quote her a little bit. She explains something very interesting about the human body and about shitting. And she explains what you can see here. We think about shit as food goes into our body and it comes out the other end, and it ends up somewhere, usually goes into a toilet, and we flush it away and we don't think about it again. But we don't often think about what happens in between our mouth and our anus. And a lot of my research, for some reason, seems to be focused on that area. And Julia also, though she comes at it as a scientist who is specialized in the gut. And what she points out that you can see in these little pictures, which is kind of interesting, is that we have an outer and an inner sphincter. So the sphincter is what opens to let your poo come out. But we also have an inner sphincter, and what happens is we control the outer sphincter. We know what's going on there, but the inner one we really don't. And so when there are leftovers from digestion, they get delivered to the inner one first, and the inner one will open in a reflex and let through a little bit of poo for testing. And there are sensory cells in our body that analyze what's been delivered and determine, is it gas or is it solid? And then they send this information up to our brain. And then this is the moment when our brain knows, I have to go to the toilet. And then the brain will do what it's designed to do. It will mediate with our surroundings. And it will say something like, okay, I checked, I'm at Uroboros Festival and I'm in the middle of this Zoom meeting and I can't really go to the toilet right now. Is it gaseous? Maybe I can get away with that so long as it's silent. Is it solid? Maybe later. And then you'll hold it in if you're able and not go to the bathroom, and you'll go later. And humans are actually one of the very few animals that can do this in such an advanced and clean way. What's curious about this is there's, all these nerves that connect our gut with our brain. 90% of the communication goes from our gut to our brain, and only 10% goes from our brain to our gut. And what this 90% looks at, it sends information to our genitals, about our visual cortex, so it can influence the way we see, the way our genitals behave, how fearful we feel, how we develop language. It can influence our moral behavior, all of this coming from the gut. And you know, we're in a time where a lot of people are thinking about what new superfood smoothie they might make, or if gluten might be bad for them. Some of us know gluten is bad for us, but some of us wonder if it is. And, you know, we're all thinking about these things, but hardly anyone seems to care about the actual organ where this happens. So the concrete anatomy and the mechanisms behind it. And as Julia Ennis explains, we're all trying to figure out this magic trick, but nobody's checking out the magician. The gut is complex. There's a lot of surface area. There's about 40 times as much surface area in our gut as there is on our skin. And it's in such a tight pipe. And there are so many immune cells in there that are being trained to behave in different ways. And we have 100 trillion bacteria in there who are doing all sorts of things, producing little molecules. And there are about 20 different hormones. So we're on a very different level. You know, our gut behaves very differently than our genitals, for example. The nervous system of our gut is so complex that, you know, apparently if you cut out a piece of the gut, take it out of the body, it's sufficiently independent in its behavior that when you poke it, it still responds. So our gut microbiome are the microorganisms that live inside our gut. So the part of our body that goes all the way from our mouth to our anus. And our gut, because of the things that Julia speaks about that I just showed you with her beautiful little drawings, our gut has been called our second brain. And it shapes not only our physical health, oh, what the hell happened there? Our physical health, but our emotional and mental well-being, our cravings, our desires, our moods, and more. So we want a healthy gut microbiome, but unfortunately, not everyone has one. 10% of people worldwide suffer from irritable bowel syndrome, which can be crippling. And these are the stats for Europe as well as worldwide. Others have inflammatory bowel diseases, so Crohn's disease and other problems that can impact everything that they do. My slides are going through automatically here and I'm not sure why, but we'll just cope with it. So this is a photograph of everything that went into my body and everything that came out over a period of time, because as lay people, our only access to our gut really is what goes in and what comes out. And for doctors, it's not straightforward either, because the gut is a black box system and every microbiome is different. And when they put cameras, where cameras just really, frankly, should never go, they can't see all of it. And they don't really understand what it should look like anyway in me or in you, because there is no ideal. So one of the questions I'm trying to understand is, how can we befriend our gut microbiome? How can we tend it lovingly like a garden, treat it as a partner in life? How can we carefully interrogate where we as humans begin and end, and what our material entanglements give rise to, and how we might literally, metaphorically, materially, and relationally grow things. So what I'm showing here is some of it is work developed by my research apprentices from last year, one of whom I think is here, Eben. And the two that are Anna's and DÄRT I continue to work with. And some of the questions that we're asking in this work is, how do we explore this space without just falling into disgust? Can we befriend our microbiome? It's a completely different species. They're at a different scale. How do we find a common language? How do we negotiate the divide between who we are and who someone else is? So we started with the Bristol stool chart, which is a standard medical chart that helps patients talk to their doctors about their poo. And a lot of people make Bristol stool chart cakes. It's a thing, it turns out. So we use this cultural trope to interrogate how well this Western scientific approach actually, how well does it work? How well does it translate? We develop poo cakes in consultation with chefs, and we constantly raised questions in our research about how do we decenter the human in our research, in our interrogation? How do we look at poo with all of the taboo that comes with poo, but use it as a vehicle to consider what it means to speak to our microbiome through food? How do we reflect on the fact that our microbiome speaks to us through our excretions? No matter what it's like, these aren't easy conversations. Can we gently coax constructive engagement with our microbiome by engaging with our poo? Can we engage with our guts through the materiality of shit and food? You know, we're not independent from our gut microbiomes. We're interdependent. We rely on them and they rely on us. So we made poo cakes made of probiotics and prebiotics and polyphenols, organic, locally sourced. And the pre and probiotics feed the guts and the polyphenols feed the people. They give us chocolate and blueberries and green tea and red wine. They also feed our guts. And these cakes are prepared with much love and care. And they serve to ask questions about how do we do this? How do we draw the line between us and all of these microorganisms that we rely on? These microorganisms that only make themselves visible to us through our shit. You know, we've been collaborating with bacteria and with microorganisms for thousands of years, making food, making beer, making wine and sausage and bread and cheese and yogurt, all kinds of foods. So how can, oh, hang on, I'm gonna just pause it here because I'm going to jump forward. How can we, you know, how can we use material? How can we use food? Because the food is what we give to our gut. The food is what we send to our microbiome. The shit is what they give us back, the poo that comes out of our body, that our brain negotiates with our gut whether or not it can release it, and it puts it out into the world. How do we go beyond the taboo of poo? So we developed a series of workshops. We did some tests in public to try out some experiments. And then we ran a series of workshops with the Danish Colitis and Crohn's Foundation. We ran a 4-hour workshop and it had 4 parts. In the first part, we had people to draw their gut using food-based paints. And what we realized when people try to draw their gut, what they realize is that they don't really know what it looks like, no matter, except for the gastroenterologists. They were the only ones who could paint their gut with confidence about where all the bits go. And this what it made visible was that nobody knew. And then the next stage, we had people build the mechanics of their gut. And this involves the body in the process of trying to understand what our gut is like. And so then we have an embodied engagement with materiality, and you're moving and you're making and you're thinking through this process. And then in the third part of the workshop, we do what's called a shitty cake workshop, and people model their poo. They make little sculptures of their poo and they make it out of the poo cakes that we've made, the ones made out of prebiotics, probiotics and polyphenols. And this is a provocation. And it's also a turning point, because this is something that people do not do, but this is something that we are going to do. So they modeled their poo out of cake and the so-called superfoods, and all of these foods were organic and locally sourced, and it smelled of chocolate and it was really delicious. And you can see part of what they're doing here, and then they described it using the Bristol stool chart, because that's the only tool really that we have to describe it. And the whole room smelled of chocolate, and then people asked if they could eat it. And then they started to eat their poo cakes. And then from there, we went back to the original drawings to try to understand how can we talk about what happened? How can we reflect on our gut? All of these questions that I raised at the beginning, how can thinking through moving, making and doing, how can engaging with foods help us to do that thinking? A whole lot of things happened in that workshop, and this talk is not really about that workshop. It's a different kind of experiment. But what came up in that workshop is that going through that process of, first of all, drawing what is hidden inside of us. So really what we only imagine and what we trust. and then trying to make the mechanics of it, and then sculpting what comes out of it so we can talk about our poo, lets people deeply explore an extraordinarily intimate act and have conversations with people about things that we don't normally discuss. So I'm going to ask you to model your poo. And I'm going to do it in a particular way, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And I'm going to do it because, you know, this is a quote from Judith Butler, and who is a researcher and philosopher, a social scientist. And what she says, as you can read, you know, we need to recognize that ethics requires us to risk ourselves at moments where we really don't know what to do, when what is happening, what is shaping us is what has formed us and brought us there is different from what is in front of us, when our willingness to become undone in relation to others constitutes our chance of becoming human. So by being vulnerable with others, maybe we can find a way forward. It's hard to talk about things. It's hard to talk about honey. So how do we talk about poo? So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to talk about some poo with you before you go back into the breakout rooms. So let me just work out which camera I'm on. Okay, so we have a lovely new clean space, and I have 4 kinds of poo. I actually have 3 kinds of poo, but I have 4 samples. And part of it is because when I went out to get dirt this morning, I went to a couple of different places, and in one place I couldn't get dirt, but I found duck poo, and that was really interesting. And duck poo is green, and this is, I don't know what this is poo from. This is horse poo. I'm not sure if it's horse or goat, but I'm pretty sure it's horse because it's kind of big. I don't know how big goat poo is, but let's see if I can get this out. But what you can see, I've had this poo from a friend's garden for some time now, and you can see that it has a whole lot of different organic matter that's in it, and you can see in here as well. Let's see if I can bring it up a bit closer. You can see that this is very grassy. This is from the ducks, and I guess ducks eat duckweed, and whereas this has other kinds of things growing in it. So even our poo is not separate from the world around us. But what I'm going to ask you to do in the breakout rooms is, with your honey and your poo and your dirt, not all of the dirt, because we want to keep a teaspoon of each sample of dirt that you have, see if you can make a model of a poo. The last poo you did. Can you think about the last poo you did, whether it was today or yesterday, or the last poo that you can remember? And can you try to describe it to people? Can you find a way with the honey and the poo? Let me get a bit of honey. And I've got some dirt. I have 3 different kinds of dirt, but let's just use this one. So this is a very dry dirt. I need a new spoon. You know, can I say get this? Maybe I'll do it in another plate. I'll do it in a plate. Can you see that? Yeah. So with this and with some honey and with some dirt, can I find a way to mix this? And in the process, I probably can't model my last poo, but I can, my negotiation with the materials can maybe help me to talk about it. I mean, my last poo was probably a bit more yellow than it was brown, but it wasn't quite as yellow as that. And so, you know, can I talk about it? Was it soft? Was it hard? Was it dry? Was it crumbly? Did it have cracks in it? How do we talk about this, and what might we learn about the world, about our gut microbiome, just in trying to talk about it? So you're going to have 10 minutes again, which it sounded like that was a bit short, so maybe we'll make this one 15 minutes. And what time is it? It's 17:41. Let's try for 10, and let's see if you can all be kind of trying to sculpt your poo and talk about it together. So that's the, I'm gonna change cameras back. And so yeah, I invite you to please go into your breakout rooms that I hope Lukasz is setting up. And those of you who are co-hosts, please remember to press record if you're not still recording. And see if you can talk about your poo using honey and shit and soil.
And just to confirm, we are keeping the same breakout rooms.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I think Lukasz is already sending people there.
Yeah, everyone's disappeared.
Yeah, okay, like good. It's happening.
So I'm going to wash my hands. Over to you.
Yeah. So, oh yeah, we are just the three of us are supposed to be here. Yeah, so how's your shit? How about your poop?
Good, yeah. I mean, for mine, I have some soil here that I got at the supermarket a while ago for repotting plants. So it's quite dry, but I have some water as well. And I'll probably use that same honey. And then I also have a tea bag that I just made some tea with. So I think maybe that could be nice to incorporate.
You're right. I have a tea bag too. I think I'm going to use that as well. But it's a strange question to like think without having like actually noticed my shit earlier. Like I actually honestly don't really look at my shit that often, I think
most of the time, yeah, if you don't have any sort of problem surrounding it, you don't feel the need to check it. You might, if you're sick or something, it might occur to you, but on a daily basis, I think for most people.
I know that some places in Central Europe, or I don't know, the toilets have like this kind of platform.
Yeah, like a ledge.
Yeah, I know in like Austria or in some places in Germany, I know that it's like that. And I thought that was super interesting because I remember noticing it a lot more then.
Yeah.
Don't get caught up talking. Do
do
it in the meantime.
Making it can help you to find ways to talk about it.
But the Austria toilet thing is really strange. It's also like, if you think about it, the whole multisensory experience, it's kind of bad, isn't it? Because then it just smells like the whole bathroom just smells much more.
You think, or why do you think they would have that? So
I really think it's because of the inspecting. Yeah, I think I even read some article about it, that it's just part of the culture where you want to inspect in general, like you are just more like into details.
Yeah.
But I also know it's it's a big thing for, those people who are like doing self-tracking, like tracking their metabolic processes, then like observing your shit, that's quite a thing. Those people.
Right.
So what are you using?
Corey's got a really big poo.
Yeah. I'm going to use these
trying to keep things
little eggs, chocolate eggs.
I'm gonna see if I can show mine. I can't really show
it.
Yeah,
cool.
I don't know. So I have the tea bag, and then the honey and some soil. And I think that my tea bag was green tea, so it's really green. So I don't think that's really the correct material to use, because I don't think my poo is like that.
I was going to say it's a bit more like duck poo than.
Yeah, maybe I'm modeling duck poo though.
Unless you ate a lot of spinach, maybe, or kale.
Yeah, but even eating a lot of spinach and kale and a lot of greens, I don't think it ever turns green.
Yeah, I haven't had that experience either.
Yeah. But I think the green tea actually nicely models the texture though of like eating a lot of vegetables.
Yeah, I think I'm missing out on a realistic texture here because I just have the soil honey and it's just a breakfast tea.
Right.
That I'm working with.
I have kind of a surprise, which is my chocolate egg had some white chocolate in it.
Very nice.
So now, well,
it's a Kinder egg.
It's one of those, like, you know, the cheap Easter eggs that came in a big bag. But I think that, I mean, I feel like a little bird. Birds have white poop, no?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also brought this thing, the balsamico, like the reduction, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Just to make more texture.
So that probably smells really strong, and
yeah,
so it's probably not, yeah, the right smell.
Yeah, you're right. It's probably, it depends.
Yeah.
If you eat a lot of balsamico.
But I think using soil is a good.
I think it gives a good base for sure.
Yeah.
Have a good soil source here.
Yeah, same. This is my soil source.
I think starting with very dry soil helps as well, because then you can illustrate any sort of wetness you have from a very dry soil, flaky one, and then you can add water onto it to whatever extent you want.
Yeah, you're right. Should actually go get my dry soil as well.
Instead of starting with a wet soil, you can't dry it out so easily.
So I just shared the Bristol stool chart here. Marketa, does that only go to us? Does that go into the breakout rooms?
Did you share it in the chat?
Yeah.
The last message I have is from about 40 minutes ago or 30 minutes ago. So
okay.
I think it must just go to the main room.
But you are in the main room.
Oh, that's okay. Well, then it just hasn't come up on my one.
By the way,
I can see it.
I found coffee from this morning. So
oh, nice.
That's a good thing.
So should we use the chart to describe it?
If it helps, yeah. Marketa, is it possible to share the chart with the people in the other breakout rooms? Can Lukasz?
Only Lukasz can do it.
Is
the stool chart? Yeah. I'm not sure he's here, Lukasz.
I'm here, and unfortunately, I cannot share the chats from the.
No, not the chat.
Just
the GIF the GIF that I just shared, are you able to then share that with the people in the breakout rooms?
Okay.
You
where can I find it in the chat?
It's in the chat.
In the chat.
It says Bristol stool chart GIF.
Okay, I will try. I will copy to my desktop and I will try
Yeah.
to lift the image. Okay.
Thank you.
And as you give it to people, Lukasz, just tell them this might help them talk about what they're doing. It might not.
I think mine is done.
Can you?
I don't know what else
have a
to
look?
do. I can show you. Yeah, it's on a board, but it's not very large. But so
It exists.
it doesn't really have a shape. That's how I kind of remember maybe one of the recent ones, I guess.
Do you remember what you ate before you did it?
I think it was oatmeal. That's why, because I eat a lot of oatmeal for breakfast. So kind of like the grains of the oatmeal, and it's like not super processed oatmeal, so it kind of has that like I don't know, the wheat part, the grain part, something, and that I think, yeah, that I think gives it a more like flaky. If I had to choose one of these on the chart, it might be between like 5 and 6. This one specifically, but maybe in another occasion I would make another type, I guess.
I can run through mine. This is mine. I'd say I would describe it as somewhere in between 3 and 4.
It's very big, if you don't mind me saying.
Yeah. I eat a lot, so I think this was after today's breakfast and lunch. So there was mushrooms and tomatoes and rye bread in this, and what else was there?
Could you see any of the remains of your food in there?
Without getting too graphic, there was tomato skin still somewhere in there. I haven't made a representation of it. Maybe this piece of the bird's beak. Yeah, so that was in there, and I forget what I had for lunch now that I'm on the spot. But yeah, no, so somewhere in between 3 and 4. No cause for concern, thankfully, today.
Cool. Marketa.
I'm just taking pictures first. But basically that's mine.
Very shiny.
Yeah,
it's very shiny. Yeah.
That must be the honey.
It must be the honey, and I guess it's the product of the 3rd day of this festival and sitting here 24/7 and not really eating properly, but just like stuffing myself with quick snacks and stuff, and eating a lot of chocolate, just like a source of energy. So that's why my poop is probably so dark.
Sometimes I find like my poo is really different when I eat lots of chocolate.
Yeah.
Like really different. It's like I don't recall I don't recall, throughout my life eating chocolate and having different poo. But now that I think a lot about poo, I definitely notice it.
Isn't it supposed to prevent diarrhea, for instance? Chocolate, like dark chocolate?
I've heard the opposite.
Ah, okay. Maybe I have it completely wrong.
Yeah, but I don't know how much that requires you to eat. Maybe that requires more than you could actually stomach.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I can stomach quite a lot of chocolate.
Okay.
One thing I noticed in changes during the months is that it varies with my menstrual cycle, for sure. It's different. With
your poo does, or your yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How? In what way?
I mean, during my period, it's a lot more, I guess, towards the higher numbers on the chart. A bit more like, yeah, like
more liquidy,
mushy and more liquidy, I think. And it also just feels differently when pooping. Like it requires a lot more effort. It feels like, and I've seen this a lot on the internet, that women describe it as like giving birth almost, but to the poo.
Pooing when you've got your period.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a whole thing about like period poo.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I agree with that actually. It's always super different. Because I guess you also have like this very different pressure in your belly.
Yeah, I think it's definitely because of that, because there's the uterus, which is really close by, and it's like applying pressure somehow, and yeah.
We must be getting close to time. I keep expecting people to land in here.
Yeah, I think
in the middle of our comments. Yeah.
In the middle of.
I think, yeah, it's been about 15 minutes now.
I'm gonna go wash my hands.
Yeah. I managed to make quite a few nice pictures of us and the pool. Nice. I'll upload it to the Google folder.
Super.
Yeah, I have to say, it doesn't smell bad.
Ah, Anna.
Yeah, we are also back.
Show us your boobs.
Yeah, everyone
Sure.
hold their poo up. Did you receive the Bristol stool chart?
Yeah, we just got it in the last minute, so we didn't get that much of a chance of.
Did you, if you open it up, you might be, if you just click on it, you might be able to think about what number your poop is at.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay, Lukasz, so everyone must be coming back.
Yes, and I spread it, your gift each.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for that, Lukasz. It seems that people got it.
I couldn't see it, actually.
The Bristol stool chart?
Yes. I
Maybe,
know it, but I just couldn't see it.
Maybe you can get it from the main chat, the chat window here now. It's in there. Can you see it?
I think there's something wrong. I saw it, like I just downloaded it and now I don't see it anymore. So I guess there's something wrong with the...
No, my group chat didn't change, actually. It's not in.
I'll just share it.
Lukasz just shared it again.
Oh,
check the chat.
Yeah. I mean, there are different versions of it. This is one. They're all basically the same. For some reason, this one looks like it's only one color. Usually they change color a little bit. So in our group, we positioned our poop on the color scale. We found that useful. So is everyone willing to show their poop?
Yes.
Sure.
And can one of the groups maybe volunteer to talk about what they discovered, what they learned? Oh, look, they're all really different.
Down here. Oh, no.
Yes, I can talk about something.
Thank you.
Yeah, at first it was just good that we went into the same groups as we were before, because all of us agreed on that it's better if you know each other a little bit before you talk about your poop, because it's still a subject that's weird to talk about. And then I think it was Anya. Yeah, Anya. She has a little daughter, a 4-year-old. So she said she's used to see poop as well. And that opened up the conversation very easily, because it's moving away from us to like another person. And then that started the whole conversation. And then we started about poop, talking about poop. And I was forming it meanwhile and like showing it. And then we were like, oh, but this looks very small. And I'm like, yeah, this is not the real size. So I was like, okay, maybe I should do the real size instead. And then I like made it a little bit bigger. And then I was like, oh, is it that big? And I'm like, oh, yeah, like this is my hand in comparison. So it was, and then we just started laughing, and it was just very funny to talk about it. But like, interesting as well to just think of your poop, because we all thought of it like you don't come in contact with it that much. If you poop, you just put like toilet paper on top and you flush it. But if you have a daughter like Anya, for example, you come in contact with it way more often. And
parents look at young children's poo quite a lot. It's an important thing to do. But there, I didn't meet the person in question, but I know someone who once met a person who has never seen their poo. Never, ever in their life have they seen their own poo, because they said once it's out, it has nothing to do with me anymore. It's not part of my life. I don't need to look at it. I don't need to see it. I don't need to engage with it. Anyone else have anything that they wanted to share? If not, we'll move on to soil.
Well, I could say something about mine if you like, Daniela.
Please.
Because
yeah.
In my group, I was the only one who had any materials to work with.
Uh-huh.
And I hadn't prepared all the types of materials, but I had humus, and I had honey, and I had dirt. And we'd had to go into a conversation about how food things and soil together, of course, really feels quite transgressive. And ruining food, so to speak, or spoiling food also feels a little bit strange for some. And we talked about where should it go? Should I be throwing it on the ground or throwing it in the toilet, right? Which would seem ironic, of course, a little bit if it goes to the toilet, but that was the discussion we had. It's maybe something unexpected because we didn't really talk about the actual materials of shitting so much, but more about the combination of materials.
I'm really glad you shared that, Andrew, because it leads into the last conversation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about soil, and then I want to have a conversation all together about soil. So I'll just share my screen again. Oops, hang on, soil. So to begin, I'm going to heavily quote two climate scientists, Asmarit Berhe and Nick Giolinsky, and they both have TED Talks that make soil science very accessible. So I'll give you the links to that at the end. So Asmarit Berhe explains that soil seems like an everyday brown thing that gets stuck to our shoes, but it's a product of breakdown of rocks that incorporates residue of organic matter, so dead plants and animals. And this mixture creates an incredibly rich resource that every living thing on the face of the earth depends on for our life, our livelihood, our food fiber needs, and everything else that you can imagine. There's only 6 foot on average of soil covering the earth's surface. It's not deep. And she describes it as the thin veil that represents the difference between life and lifelessness in the earth's system. And carbon in soil is continuously being exchanged with the atmosphere. So this happens when plants photosynthesize, they take up carbon from the atmosphere. And when the plant dies, and every living thing that has consumed the plant also dies, the carbon that's been taken up from the atmosphere returns to the soil, and it's stored there as carbon. And it's stored through 2 processes. In the first case, through the plant matter or the animal matter, when these organisms die. And the other one is while the plant's alive, its roots push out carbon-based sugars into the soil that feed microbes. And the sugar is made of carbon, and the microbes are made of carbon. And it's a cycle. Plants take up soil carbon and use it as food, and some of the carbon makes it back into the atmosphere. Some cycles through quickly, through the soil, but some stays there. And there are particular microbes that help soil carbon to clump so that it can't be consumed by plants and it can't make it back to the atmosphere. And there are soil minerals that react with soil carbon and form chemical bonds that also prevent it from being consumed and released. And these are called aggregates, and they're like little vaults. They leak a little bit, but most stay there for decades and some stay for centuries. So the aggregates can lock the carbon into the soil for tens or hundreds or sometimes thousands of years. So soil in that way is like a carbon bank. And over billions of years, more carbon was deposited in the Earth's soil than what was released. And that's what makes the soil in some places incredibly fertile. But in the past 100 years, we've lost billions and billions of tons of carbon. And as everyone I'm sure is aware, it's a problem. Some of it, this increase in the amount that's lost, some of it has been through willful deforestation. So this is a photo of the Amazon taken in August last year. But a report that came out recently said in the first 4 months of this year, so from January to April, an area more than 20 times the size of Manhattan was wiped out in the Brazilian Amazon. That's a 55% increase on what was destroyed in the same period last year. And it's the highest for that time period since monthly records began. So the deforestation is happening for a number of reasons, and you may not realize, but the choices that you make with your food play a really important role in that for planetary health, but also for human health. So deforestation is largely driven by the international trade of export commodities. And these are, the main ones are timber and wood products and tobacco and cocoa, which makes chocolate, coffee and cotton. And what we find is it's leading to deforestation, which is a problem for the planet because, as I said, the carbon goes into the atmosphere. There are a whole lot of issues connected to it, but it's also a problem for people. Malaria, for example, in these deforestation hotspots, 20% of malaria cases are directly attributable to deforestation. So it's kind of crazy what's going on. And so this year is on track for record-breaking deforestation and also record-breaking fires. So this is a photo from Australia. You all know about the fires in Australia. There were fires the size of, I think it was Belgium or the Netherlands. I can't remember which is larger of the two countries, but it was the size of the larger country. My family was directly affected by the fires. 25% of Australians were directly affected, if not by the fires themselves, by losing their homes or having to evacuate. Then they were affected by the smoke or the particulate matter. So what does fire do to soil? What you can see here, the green shoots, they're called black boys or grass trees. Black boys is a wonderful example of colonialist naming. These grass trees rely on fire to fertilize their seeds, so you can see them coming back. Fire is really interesting for a number of reasons. If you burn vegetable mass, so if you're farming and you cut down the sugar cane, for example, you take parts of it for the sugar, but parts of it you leave behind. If you farm corn, you take the corn kernels, but all the other bits of the plant is left behind. And there are two ways you can treat it. And one way is to slash and burn. And what you develop is called biochar. And that's charcoal or biomass that's biomass derived black carbon. So you get this carbon, if you apply it to the soil, it can serve as a new approach to carbon sequestration. So carbon sequestration has been spoken about a lot, and it's about finding ways to lock carbon in so it doesn't go into the atmosphere. And what we found with biochar, so sequestering the carbon into the ground, is that it has positive effects in reducing carbon emissions and it increases the sequestration of greenhouse gases. So that's great news. And the production of biochar and its application to soil also improves soil fertility, which is great news. And it increases crop production, which is great news. And conversion of biomass, so dead plants, to biochar, it leads to about 50% more sequestration of the initial carbon compared to the low amounts that are retained after burning. It's only 3% as opposed to 50%. or with biological decomposition, 10 to 20% after 5 to 10 years is locked into the ground. So biochar becomes very, very interesting in terms of trying to keep more carbon in the soil rather than in the atmosphere. And it yields a more stable soil carbon than current techniques of adding compost to the soil. So this all sounds really good. But as I said, we're looking at more fires. We've seen uncontrollable fires in Australia, unprecedented fires in California, unprecedented fires in many different places in the world. But biochar burn happens between 350 to 500 degrees Celsius, but because of climate change, the bushfires in Australia, for example, were burning at a temperature of 1200 degrees centigrade. So that's far too great to make biochar. So we have to work out, we can't just let the atmosphere take care of itself. We've pushed many things beyond tipping points, and we need to actively engage to try to fix the things that we have actively engaged to destroy. One of our active engagements is farming practices. So farming practices are destroying the integrity of the soil. 80% of our food relies on annual crops rather than perennials. Perennials are things that just keep growing. So annual crops means that every year you have to till the soil, you have to dig into the soil. And doing this on an industrial scale is absolutely devastating in terms of the structural integrity of the soil, as well as the amount of carbon that's disturbed and released. So these human activities result in unsustainable rates of soil loss all around the world. As a result, people are being forced to farm more and more marginal lands, and the soil is becoming more and more exposed to heavy rains and is vulnerable to being washed away. So this is soil erosion by water in Europe, in Africa, and in Israel. Now, a recent study finds that soil erosion by water costs the world economy about $8 billion a year. So it's hardly insignificant. Unmitigated use of agricultural chemicals is not helping. Now, a third of the Earth's ice-free surfaces is farmland. So there is potential for outsized impact if we get carbon into soil rather than out of soil. So if we can switch to no-till regenerative agriculture and breed brand new perennial crops rather than annual crops, it can help to restock soil carbon and produce delicious grains and greens, and maybe in the process save the world in terms of in terms of the, sorry, I've skipped two, yeah, there. In terms of the world will be fine, but the world being habitable for humans is something that we really need to be grappling with. So now I'm going to quote the other soil scientist, Nick Jelinski, because he has some really beautiful stories to tell. As he says, soils are our most important resource. They're factories of life and the most diverse and complex environments on Earth. They are the foundations of entire terrestrial food systems. Soils, arguably, do more things critical to the human race than any other substance. They serve as water purification systems, recycling systems, engineering media, plant growth and support systems. They're food and home to a wide range of organisms. Most modern antibiotics were first isolated from soil organisms. So we owe one of the most important revolutions in modern medicine to unseen but incredibly common and abundant life in the soils. So Francis Hole was a very preeminent soil scientist, and he talks about TNS. So what he says is we are all just living, breathing, conscious embodiments of soil. And he spoke about the fact that we are temporarily not soil. That's all. You know, so if you think about it, let's see if I can stop sharing and come back so that let's see, you can see me now. So let's see if I can just do this and go back here. Okay, so I hope you can still see me now. So it's maybe a bit less boring than continuing to look at that image, or a little bit more engaging. So if you think about it, my heart is probably beating at about 80 beats per minute at the moment. So every one of those heartbeats is a rhythmic contraction driven by an ionic potential that's carried by potassium ions through membrane proteins. Okay, so before the potassium was in my body, it was in the food that I ate. Let's say a banana from Ecuador. So before that potassium was in the banana, it was locked away in a tiny soil clay particle somewhere in Ecuador for tens or thousands or hundreds of thousands of years. And as that clay particle weathered, the potassium was released into the soil water, and it was taken up by the roots of the banana and incorporated into the fruit tissue, which I ate. So every one of my heartbeats is because Ecuadorian soil is part of who I am. So this is I'm still quoting Nick Jelinski, just to be clear. So as he tells us, human activities result in unsustainable rates of soil loss all around the world. Soil conservation is a problem for all people in all generations. Our soil is a finite and precious resource. Our Earth has a thin veneer of soil that is unique in the solar system. In our heartbeats and in our bones, you and I and people all around the world are united in our shared dependence on and origin in soil. And one day we will all be united in our return to the soil. So behind every person, community, political system lies the silent greatness of our soil. Every day between our birth and our death is one day that we are temporarily not soil. And what we choose to do with each of those days is important. Our connection to the earth and each other is real, and it transcends all of our perceived differences. And there are two things that will matter to our grandchildren. Number one is how we choose to treat each other. And number two is how we choose to treat our soils. Our understanding of that connection will determine our fate and the future for many generations that come after us. So on that note, I want to just show you the three soils that I have with me and just show a little bit of difference. And then we only have a moment left, so I'll just lay them out very quickly. And I should have prepared them before. I didn't think we'd have run out of time so quickly. This one I collected in Colling this morning. You can see it's very sandy and dry. And when I tried to get soil from near the lake, I thought it would be maybe a little bit richer. As you saw, I got duck poo rather than soil. This one is a little bit more connected. And this one is a poor quality soil that comes in store-bought basil. I've since learned the reason I can never keep my basil tins alive is because they intentionally sell you herbs and plants with poor quality soil. So you have to do a lot of work if you want to keep them alive. And this one comes from a potting mix. So I'm just going to lift them up and show you the difference. And then I want to invite you after we finish here to have a look at the soil, to have a look, sorry, I'll come back here to have a look at your own soil and have a think about the things that we've brought up. And what I need to do now is this and this, because I want to just open up what I hope will be a bit of a conversation about DÄRT. In preparing this workshop and in what led me to prepare it, I had this idea, or what I realized in doing the research for it, and some of it is research I've been doing for a couple of years now, and some of it is really new. It's really new for me to be engaging soil, which is why it's incredibly important that I'm citing experts in this area. I haven't yet begun to make connections, but I'm just connections between the bits of knowledge from disparate places. But what I realized is that the honey that goes to our guts, that results in our poo, that goes into the ground, that feeds our flowers, that develop pollen that the bees then take and that turn into honey. In all of these processes, microorganisms are fundamental. And for the last 10 minutes, I'll stop sharing. I hope people got the gist of my funny little drawing. For the last 10 minutes, I just like to open up to see if anyone has any thoughts about exactly. I mean, what I'm trying to work out is where is the line that determines if something is soil or if something is food, if something is shit or if something is food, and who is it food for, and does it matter? I mean, as a design researcher and a design educator, I try to ask, what if everything was edible? It doesn't mean it has to be edible by humans, but where do we draw these lines, and how do we navigate them, and how can engaging with the more than human of bacteria help us? So I just want to open it up for the last 10 minutes. So
thank you for that, Danielle.
Unmute yourselves.
Yeah, unmute yourself, please, humans, so we can all discuss.
I mean, Marketa mentioned earlier, you know, I work with composting, but I work with the perishability. And I see that as a collaboration with microorganisms, making things that will disappear after my experiments are done. I don't know, how do we do this?
Yeah, well, I can contribute saying that I was an adult actually when I realized that the things we're working on, they come from some of them are organic materials and it's soil, and some of them are minerals, which is sand. And I never actually, somehow I went through my entire education, you know, when you have geography classes or biology classes, never really thinking about this, you know, the fact that there's actually two very different things. And that, so I think this notion that some of the things are organic and other are mineral, and some of them are more connected to the life circle of the humans, while other are more connected to the life circle of the, I don't know, the universe maybe. I mean, this is something which I discovered pretty lately. So I'm not sure if it addresses directly your question, but this is something I have been thinking about actually when you were speaking.
Nice, thank you.
Yeah, I suppose, Daniela, when you start to frame things in ecosystem terms and energy exchange terms, and consider materials as fuel for different living beings, and we are part of that, then you start to break down the idea of what is food, right? I mean, you said it already, and I just reiterated really. If you're involved in composting, which I am, and you said you are, and I know others in this call are also, then obviously you're recognizing that what is your waste is good for some others, and those others maybe ones you can see and maybe ones you cannot see, and even by putting different materials together, especially when things start to ferment, then it attracts other beings, insects, and other, of course we're talking bacteria, but you know, there's a whole ecosystem there of molds and everything mixed together. And you start to recognize that your food, as it breaks down, becomes food for some others, etc., etc., right? And obviously it's going to a scale which you don't perceive anymore, right? And that's anyway a very interesting space to be involved in. I think if you, as some of you in the chat are interested in things like zero food waste, composting helps you understand that process, because you realize it's just not, the food is only changing semantically or semiotically for others.
Thank you.
Also, I have like a really short thought, I guess, about like about this whole workshop. And when you were speaking about the connections, you know, between like what we eat, then our like gut system is processing it, and then like shit, and then it comes back to the soil, and then it comes back to our food. So I was just thinking that it's a really nice graphic symbolization, or how to, like the picture of how everything works and how it is connected. So it's really important for people, I guess, to kind of see this, how the system works, or see this picture, I guess, to like really think about like what we are doing to this cycle. Because when we eat shitty things, you know, and chemicals and not nice things, it comes back through our guts to the soil and back to nature and back to our food. So like much like more of the not good stuff we are eating or we are putting to the soil, it's also about like putting to the soil, you know, because some people just throw away, I don't know, stuff to the nature, and they are like, okay, it's not my problem anymore, but they actually eventually comes back to the person, like through food or through some things. So I'm not sure if it's so connected with this, but I think it's important for everybody to kind of see, or it would be really cool, like everybody could participate in this kind of workshop to like really think about like what they are doing to like them or to the nature. It eventually comes back and have like some results. So if it's bad things, what they are putting to the soil or to their bodies, it's kind of like defecting like everybody and the whole system. Yeah, I don't know. So
thank you.
However, I think it's a huge challenge to actually be able to raise this awareness throughout the whole society.
Mm-hmm.
Even in our group, like when we talk about the fertilizing the soil part, we briefly talked about how to use like a compost from human feces, kind of, or with human feces. And then one of us was like, but we don't use it for the food that we grow, because that's
in
kind
Denmark,
of disgusting.
it's illegal. Mm.
Okay, yeah.
Mm.
And that kind of, I don't know, seems a bit ironic in that case, if you compare it to that, because yeah, it's not part of the circle anymore. You put it away and then it's another part, another circle opening up or something like that.
Mm.
Yeah, building on what you just said there, Nico, it's strange to take it out of the circle, because it feels like it's to compost human feces would almost make perfect sense. And to me, it's probably a little bit strange that it's illegal. I mean, if animal feces is used and they are not eating the same foods as us, it would make sense for it all to stay in the same cycle. Possibly.
Sorry.
Maybe I can say something. So when I read the description for the workshop, I was really puzzled that you were putting in soil and dirt, because this is not something that I normally think about when there is something with eating. And I think when I had to think about actually what to bring, I didn't bring any real soil in the beginning. I was actually just bringing food that resembled soil for me. And also what was like waste or something. So I took a banana that I have been taking out of the trash, because for me it was something that was dirty for someone, but for me it wasn't, because I could still eat it. And then when you started talking more about this whole thing about the soil and all of the things that it actually have of nutrition and very old nutrition as well, I was thinking about that when I went to high school, that we went to see like all the layers from all around the time age. And
And I don't know, for me, there was a lot of things that I started to think about that I have not been reflecting on regarding food and regarding this whole system. And I think that was very interesting for me to put that into that context, because it is all related, and it is something that I can't remember who said it, maybe it was Danielle, that the whole thing about that what you actually eat, or if you throw something away, that is going to come back to you again in a way. And I think that was really interesting.
Thank you. Anne.
Because we're locked down in Britain, and because at one point we thought there wasn't going to be any food in the supermarkets and so on for a while, everybody suddenly became domestic goddesses and gods and so on, and started to rethink their relationship with waste. So there's a lot of stuff that's gone on in the last few weeks in Britain about those relations that I think hasn't been present in it's been in some people's minds quite a lot, but I don't think that sense of trying to make everything last and eating food in order of its deterioration. So you're always eating something that's just about to go off, because that way you've planned, because you only get food every 3 weeks or something if you're getting supermarket deliveries. So it's eased up now, but there was a real sense of being thrown back on the resources we had. So people are using bits of fabric to make masks, and suddenly, I'm characterizing it because I think it has really changed that sense of those relations. And also because I decided I was going to do this workshop in my garden, because I've discovered my Wi-Fi will actually work if I sit outside my living room. And this thing that looks a little bit, I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, we can.
Actually, can you see a mound? Sort of green mound.
Yep.
If I can show you this properly. So this is my experiment in this capacity, is that so it's showing now, big green mound,
yep.
which is, it's the beginning of something called Hugelkultur, which probably could be said much better by the Germans I've been talking to earlier. Which is going to be a permaculture thing where you build it up so that you don't have to dig. So I just thought, since I was sat in my garden next to something that sort of spoke to how I might be trying to work out that I can't use the cardboard because it's been through poison, and I can't use the wood chips because I don't know where they've come from, but I can use bits of wood to build it because it's supposed to be something that, and I just thought it encapsulated a lot of what we've been talking about. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm super sorry to be the boring one.
Can I make a closing comment?
That would be.
So in doing my just beginning my research on soil, I discovered that soil must contain 4 things in order for it to be soil that can function as soil. And it must contain bacteria and protozoa and nematodes and fungi. And if it's missing any of these, then it doesn't work. It doesn't regenerate. It doesn't help things grow. It doesn't do what soil needs to do. Things do not thrive if any one of these elements are missing. And bacteria is one of these elements, and the bacteria both sequester the carbon but also release the carbon. So I think it's a beautiful example of how we can't just take something out of this system and imagine that it's gone and our problems will be solved. It's never out of the system, and we can't shift the balance of things with some idea that we imagine we're making it better, because we're misguided. We'll never have enough knowledge to really understand the impact of what we're doing. So we need to tread carefully and be humble and have humility as we do these things. And Anne gave some lovely examples about thinking about, where did the wood chips come from? Where does the cardboard come from? Where are these, what are the implications? How do we understand these cycles and how they come together? So I just wanted to share that, and I want to thank everybody for coming, and I'm excited to see what happened in the breakout rooms that I wasn't part of. So the people who are sharing the videos with me will do that at some point, and I will put the slides together and share them. At the moment, they're in a PowerPoint, so they're too big to share, but I'll move them online. I'll do something with them to make them small enough to share, and then you'll get the references and everything. So thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your days, and just be kind and be great, and until I see you again, and be in touch whenever you like. So
thank you, Danielle. This was fantastic.
Thank
this
you.
was really nice. Thank you.
Okay. Yay, nice.